Jasmine. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Isabel. So I am going to be relying on notes fairly heavily today. It's the first time I've done this presentation, and I've tried so many times to rehearse this, and every time I look at the slides, I just go completely blank. So even on this one. So I'm really sorry. I'm going to try hard not to sound like a robot that I'm reading too much from the script, but yeah, it is what it is. So this is me and my two girls. I'm Jasmine. This is Ruby, the little one, and Indigo, the big one. Big, like she's 7, and the little one's 5. They're, oh my God, sorry. So originally I'm from far north Queensland. I've lived all over the east coast of Australia in my lifetime, and since the late 90s I've lived in Sydney, but I spent a bit of time living in London in my late 20s. So this, as I said, I'm a mum to these two amazing girls, and I've been lucky enough to build my business around spending as much time with them as I can, because next year they're both going to be in school, so I'll have a big empty space in my day and in my home where they won't be there. So I've been really fortunate that for the last few years, while they've been in my life, that I've been able to prioritise them but still build a business alongside that and get my professional fulfilment from work. I think normal people would probably list some of their cool hobbies here, but pretty honestly, if I'm not working or hanging out with these guys, I'm pretty much either at the gym or at home watching some science fiction or reading science fiction or comics, or I'm just working on my MBA. I did actually try to do some bouldering a couple of weeks ago after a 15-year break from rock climbing. Didn't go very well. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of pain. And I don't recommend it if you're unfit like me. As Isabella mentioned in the introduction, my background is technical writing and knowledge management, as well as business process analysis, corporate training, all within large corporates like the Big 4 banks and government departments. And for the last 8 years, I've been running a web design business. And last year I changed the focus of that business to digital strategy and service design, and rebranded it as Brain Candy Consulting. So I wear many hats, and I have a really wide set of what I think are overlapping skills. So sometimes I just call myself geek to human translator, because I really enjoy helping the business people and the technical people and the users to all understand each other and speak a common language to get the best results from working together. So this presentation is basically about client education. And in both my corporate and freelance experience, I found that the key to project success is having that shared understanding of the goals and the processes, as well as clear communication. So basically, projects tend to go off the rails if you don't invest enough time up front establishing what needs to be done, how the work will get done, and who will do it. So for these reasons, I feel really passionate about client education, because that's half of the equation. As we moved away from engaging full service agencies to lead our website projects and towards more hiring freelancers to do just the web design or just the web development, that client education and leadership from a singular agency or project manager is starting to fade out, because people just do their part of the project and then they move on. And we've also moved away from starting projects with extensive documentation, figuring out things on the fly instead, which is kind of okay to some extent, but it also can cause a few problems. And I think probably we've moved a bit too far in that direction of less documentation. And I think even that if you are using a formal agile approach, that the goal there really, it's about having the right amount of documentation and not just aiming to have as little documentation as possible. So a lot of what we're going to be covering today is what sort of documentation we need to produce. So Emma just gave us a great session about planning and building a website. We're going to be looking at some of the same sorts of ideas, but from a different angle. This is probably more appropriate if you're doing like your second or third version of your website, if your business has grown and you're now looking at more complex features, if you've gone through a rebrand since you've done a first website for yourself. And if you've already been through website projects experiences previously, you probably ran into some of the common problems of website projects, which are to run over time, to run over budget, and to come in under quality with missing features. So it's probably quite frustrating and expensive. So the goal today is to help you avoid that kind of experience again with a bit of knowledge and a bit of planning. I basically want to give you some insights into effective website project planning from a client's perspective. So we'll cover these things that are up there. This doesn't actually represent like the structure of today's presentation. This is more just this is the outcomes of it. The structure we're going to follow is more tracking the progress of the website roadmap, so the 5 stages of a website project, because it just makes more sense to deliver it along that way. Should give you a word of warning as well. There is probably a fair bit of jargon in this talk, and I'm really sorry about that. It's usually a name of mine as a technical communicator and plain English professional that we try to avoid using jargon as much as possible. But in this situation, it's there's no way around it, because we need to talk about things using the terms that people in the industry use. And the benefit of that is that if you know what these things are and what they're called, you'll be able to communicate with other professionals to have that common understanding on a project. But it also means, and this is very important for this topic because this is so big, we're not going to cover everything today, but if you know what those terms are, you can go off to Google and search up content strategy, or you can search up wireframes and things like this, because knowing that those are a thing, you can ask Google to help you learn what they are in detail. We just skipped over that one. Basically, actually we probably covered some of these project mistakes. I don't think we need to go into those ones again. But just mainly things like just not having a well-described scope for your project, not having your goals documented, hiring, one common thing through this thing as well is hiring the wrong kind of people to help with the wrong kind of tasks is a really quick way to derail your project. So hopefully we'll prevent that through today's content. One of the other really common mistakes is as well is not having one person from the client side of things in charge of all the communicating and coordinating with whatever professionals that you're working with. It's really frustrating from the professional side of things to be sending emails back to the client saying, hey, we get approval on these wireframes or these layouts? It goes to one person and perhaps they don't respond because they don't think their response is needed because someone else is handling that. Unless we have like a clear project charter to tell us who is responsible for signing off which part of it, ideally that's one person across the whole project, then everything can really quickly turn to soup. So what is a website project, roadmap, sorry. So roadmaps generally, like the term just means it's a high-level plan that will get you from A to B. It is typically a list of the stages and the milestones and the deliverables and outputs that are involved in delivering the project. So that's where we're going to start now. We're going to have a look at the high-level roadmap. And then after we've gone through those 5 stages really quickly, we'll go through each one in turn and see what those outputs are and who can help us to deliver those. Okay. Now, what we call these stages and what order they happen in, what happens within one stage where one ends and when the next one begins, or which stage an activity really belongs in isn't the important part here. It's just to know that things happen in a sequence. That there are a couple of points where things do need to be done in a strict order, but it's just useful to have some sort of frame of reference to start with. And really the 2 main things is having your requirements sorted up front, and then having all your contents and layout ready for the developer before you ask them to start work, which is what Emma explained to us previously as well. You're probably going to hear it in a few people's speeches over the next couple of days because it's just so important and it makes such a difference to project success. So this is my model that I use. It's based on the ADDIE model, which is used in the instructional design world, which is about creating training materials. It's changed up a little bit, but it's applicable to anything we build stuff. So we start off with discovery. It's where we can do our research into the goals for the business, the website users. We're establishing all the requirements of the projects as well as any constraints. We then bring together all of that research and analyse it. We compile it into a set of insights that form our strategy and guide the following stages. Design, obviously, where we take care of what the site will look like and how it will do what it needs to do. Also here we prepare the content and images that will be used on the site. And then obviously development, we move here, we start building the thing. Before we've got to this point, obviously we've taken care of all of the decisions really, the design decisions, making the content. So this stage should be much more smooth running as a result of having made all those decisions and documenting everything beforehand. We connect everything up to any external like CRMs like ActiveCampaign or MailChimp and things like this. We do all the testing to make sure it does what it's supposed to do. Then when all the boxes are ticked, we launch it, which is basically all that happens in the implementation stage. You can also put in the ongoing maintenance into this stage as well to make sure the site continues to function properly. And then this phase, the evaluation phase, starts as soon as it's been released into the wild. We need to start collecting data straight away. Again, as Emma said before, you might not look at your data for 3 months, for a year, 3 years after you launch your site, but the important part is that you start collecting that data. So you hook up Google Analytics and whatever tool the day that you launch your site. So that data starts collecting because you don't wait till you're ready to look at it to start collecting it because there won't be any data to review. So this evaluation helps us to make sure that the site is meeting the goals that were identified back at the start of the project at the discovery phase, and it helps us to continually look for ways to improve performance of the website. So that's a high level look at the 5 stages. Once you've documented your requirements in that first stage, you'll then have a personalised roadmap for your specific project. But at this general level, there's no one-size-fits-all roadmap because not all websites require the same level of time or effort on each stage due to goals and budgets. It just doesn't make sense to do the same level of activity for sites at a lower budget that might only be online for 12 months versus something that we expect to be making, $1 million over 12 months. Just knowing that the projects move through these stages is quite important, as is knowing the types of activities that are happening in those stages, what the outcomes and outputs of those activities are, and that's what we're going to look at next. Okay. I did mention earlier, this is not, this is a fairly flexible roadmap. It's not prescriptive. You don't have to do things strictly in the same order. You may do more or less activities as well. The same is true really of the roles that we're going to cover in this project. Because there's not really probably never really was, but there's definitely not these days a hard distinction between roles like a web designer and a web developer. Especially because we now have content management systems that make it easier for someone who's not trained in coding to be able to build a website. The main message around hiring roles for me for today is to get away from that thinking of, I need to build a website, so I'm going to go out and hire a developer to help me to do that. They might not be the first person that you need, and you might not be ready to hire them to do the work because you need to go through these other stages first and have your content prepared and your images prepared and layouts prepared before you can engage that developer. So developers are great, but they're not like a multi-tool to do everything for Okay, so stage 1, discovery. It's where we get to know why we're doing this and what needs to be done. We're setting a solid strategy for how we will proceed, and we're customising that roadmap. This is a stage where there's the most client involvement. So be prepared to work collaboratively with your web professional and involve both your team and some of your customers if that's possible. Before we unpack this discover phase, I just want to call out as well, the activities in this stage typically are bundled in with design, which is true. Like, it's all part of the process of website design, because design is about identifying and solving problems, but because the word design tends to have associations with just the visual side of things and artwork, and it's so much more than that, I like to sort of break this up into 2 separate stages to make it clear how important this first stage of the strategy and research is, because it tends to get overlooked. And the more time that you spend here, the less time you'll actually need in the subsequent stages. And if you skip this stage, it's the fastest way to make your project fail. This is how you end up with your zombie projects. The ones that never get signed off because they keep on growing because you haven't worked out what you needed before you started building. So here are some of the activities that would go on in the discovery phase. Please don't be overwhelmed. You can scale it again. You might get through all of this in a single day. You might take you 3 months. You might do more activities than what we have here, or you might do less. Basically, this is to do with, again, like I said before, research and strategy, specifically looking at your researching your users in the market, looking at your competitors' websites, doing some SEO keyword research to help you with your site structure, conducting a content audit to look at what content you already have produced as an organisation, what pamphlets and flyers you have, what Facebook posts have gone out, what information sheets are given to your customers, and then looking at the gaps so that you can brief your copywriter. And because, oh gosh, sorry. I was jumping ahead of myself. I was like, there's a big shout out to copywriters in a couple of slides, and I sort of just jumped the gun. So looking at your business goals, we can work backwards from there, work out how many sales we need to make, and then basing it on a typical conversion rate, we can work out how many visitors that means we need to attract to our site and then convert every month. It's also, we have opportunities here to automate some of your common tasks and processes so that you can streamline things for both your customers and for your staff. And the way that we do this is through applying the one at the bottom here, UX and service design, which is the bit I get really excited about. It's fun and it has a really big impact. So we're just basically threshing out our hopes and dreams for this new shiny bright website, deciding all the features it needs to have, what does it need to do in sense of meeting goals, as well as in the practical sense of what buttons and pages and features does it need. Then we take all of this and use it to prepare the outputs to guide the following stages. So the outputs are also known as deliverables. They're basically your documents that record all the information and insights and decisions that come out of the activities that we just had a look at. They are absolutely essential the more people you have working on a project. This is how you communicate between people doing the different jobs. This is how you keep everybody on the same page. These documents. The output for one task tends to be an input to another task, if that makes sense. So it's a really important thing to have some of these. These might not be like 10 or so separate documents. You might have all of these as one paragraph in one document altogether. Like these could be, some of these might be 100 pages on their own. Some people might do them as like a 5-page document for the whole thing. Again, the whole thing's scalable. Don't think that you have to be doing this in an enterprise way for it to be worthwhile doing. It's any time spent on making any of these type of documents is time well spent. So at a minimum, we'd need things like a sitemap and a list of the site requirements, so the things that it needs to have and to do. We need to have a brief for a web designer if we're hiring one, or for a web developer if we're hiring one of those. That way they know exactly what they need to create for us, pardon me. We're going to be relying on their expertise on how that's going to be achieved, but what we need to give to them is a very clear and detailed description of what and why, so that they can give us the most suitable solutions. So these are some of the typical roles that would help us at this stage. You might choose to do some or all of these things and prepare those outputs yourself. If you're looking for professional help, however, these are some of the common titles that you'd be looking at hiring. You might not need any of these people. You might need all of them. Who knows? The ones I want to call out are web designer, because it's a much broader term than people tend to think of. Design does, technically speaking, include all the strategic work that's going on in this phase, but you need to make sure that that's the kind of designer that you're about to engage, rather than one who comes from a graphic design background and maybe they just want to focus on helping your visual identity. Both are entirely fine. I'm not saying one is better than the other in any way at all. It's just you must know which type of designer you need for your project at that point in time, and what type of person you have in front of you who you're about to hire to do the work for you. UX or service designer can help you working through that process side of things, making sure that you're supporting the ways that your staff and your customers want to get tasks done using your website. Digital strategist might be a new one. It's another broad one. It picks up a lot of the stuff that a web designer was probably doing. And digital marketer, again, similar sorts of stuff, but they were going to be focusing more on your advertising or perhaps your sales funnels and things like this. Okay, so making this work, basically you just need to think strategically, put everything into writing, and try to have one point of contact. Okay, so we've looked at the first part of the design process, identifying our requirements, setting a strategy. Now we're going to look at more of the visual side of design. So the ultimate outcome of this stage is knowing what the user interface will look and feel like. And if we've done a really good job in stage one, if we've prepared a good brief for the designer, this stage is going to require a lot less input from you and should be a lot quicker. Activities going on in this stage are fairly self-explanatory, because these are, whereas the first phase was really quite abstract and ideas driven, this is a lot more concrete. These are things that you can see and touch, so it's a lot easier from the client side of things to get a handle on the work here. Brand and logo design, as it says, typographic design is your fonts, designing the headings and paragraph styles. Wireframing, just a very basic sort of low fidelity layout of the most important elements of your page, so that we can then move into doing more the mock-ups and layouts of what a page will look like when it has the brand and logo design applied to it. This is the part about copywriting that I was thinking about earlier, because this is so exciting to me. This is when all your copywriting, all your content needs to happen. Now, it is a little bit controversial as to whether copywriting should be happening before or after you design your page layouts. There are very good arguments for both points of view. I am not going to declare which side of the fence I sit on. The important thing is that it happens here now in this phase, before you hire your developer or before you give them the green light to go ahead and start building. Do not start building without all of your content available, please. Please. It's pretty much the only non-negotiable out of all this. A lot of the stuff I'll be saying probably will be up for debate, and I'm fine with that. It's just, you just have to have a framework to follow rather than just being haphazard with your projects. But this is probably the one thing that's everyone who's here today would probably agree on. Your outputs for this stage, again, this is all lots of nice, pretty things. Makes it much easier to see where the website's going. Your big hitters here are your wireframes and then your mock-ups or layouts of the finished site. So people that you might turn to for help here. Probably a smaller list than we had at that start with the pure strategy stage. I can't read my own handwriting. That's an interesting one. Yes, great point, Jasmine. You did well there. I think an important thing to ask, did we cover this a moment ago? I'm so sorry, this is a terrible presentation. I apologise retrospectively and in advance for my complete unprofessionalism. But knowing the difference between a website and a UI designer and whether it's a logo or brand designer, yes, we did that, didn't we? Yes, sorry. But it's just about knowing who you're hiring here. Yes, sorry, no, here's where it relates to logos versus layouts, because if you have a budget to do so, it's often a better outcome to work with a specialist logo designer separately to do your logos, and then have a specialist website designer to do your layouts. Because unless you are Emma, oh my gosh, thank you very much, 5 minutes. Unless you are Emma and multi-talented, probably like me, and you can do okay with some things, but your logos probably suck. So not everyone's good at everything. So just try to pick people based on what they specialise in. Again, your copywriter is worth their weight in gold because they will help you keep your project on deadlines by having your content done. Making this stage work, again, having the right expectations and the right communication, being specific with your feedback, and working with the 3 rounds of revisions that most designers work with. That's pretty much an industry standard. Just don't dribble it out in 500 emails, do it 1 round and then see the next version and then give all your feedback on that in one step. We have 3 stages left, but these are all very short because everything is front-loaded. All the hard work has been done before now. This is where you hand everything over to your developer and stand back and say, I'll see you in a few weeks. Unless you are building it yourself. In which case, if you've done all the stuff that we've spoken about, you have documents that will guide you through this, and it will be much easier, much faster, and much less painful. Because knowing all your functional requirements before you start means that you won't get into the situation of adding additional features where you say you've picked a plugin and then you need to go to get another plugin to do something else and they don't talk to each other, or they don't play nice. Or you've gone for a basic option for event ticketing and then you decide you want to sell books and a membership. Maybe you could have chosen one tool that covers all of those things in one, instead of a messy collection of plugins that each take payments separately. So it's developing a site is so much easier if you've actually made all the decisions up front and you're not having to decide as you go along. And again, do your developer a favour and have all your content ready to go. So as it says in the box, this is where we do the developing. And at the end of it, we have a beautiful and fully functioning website. Again, as logic would dictate to you, a website developer is probably the #1 person you'd go to here, but they may go by other names, as we have on these slides. If you have a fairly simple site, or if you have all your documentation together in a lovely little pile with a bow on it, a VA or a technical VA could be very well capable of building the site for you. Which is another reason for being well organised. So here, success in this stage in developing obviously hinges on all the previous stages being organised and everything's clear and well documented. Similar provisos here to hiring the right website developer comes down to knowing it's horses for courses. Not all developers like doing e-commerce. I hate e-commerce. I love big, fat, crazy collections of content that needs to be served up in all sorts of wonderful ways. So that's the kind of projects I'd prefer to work on. You need to make sure that the developer has a specific set of skills that you need for your specific project. Then we basically put the site live, archive your old site, do any redirects that need to be done, and voila, we have a beautiful live website. Again, same roles as the previous stage. Have a bit of patience, basically. This one, it's not just push a button and everything's magically online. It can take a little while for things to get synced up across the internet. And keep all your account details written down. Like, it's so many times I come across new clients and it's like, well, what's your hosting login? I don't know. What's your logins for your existing website? I don't know. Thanks. I've got to go and talk to the old website developer that you really don't have a good relationship with. Let me be the middleman. That's so much fun. Favourite thing ever, says no one ever. Where am I? I'm out of sync with my notes here. That's fine, because I'm disregarding them anyway. So we're up live. Oh yeah, and a bit of preventative maintenance is good. If you can't do it, if you don't know how, learn. If you don't want to, hire someone. It's cheaper than building a new website. Evaluating, you know what, I think we are pretty close to time, and I think we covered this, pretty much the same messages in the overview. We are ready to stop, all right. Start collecting data from the start. That's all I have to say about this one. Get everything connected from the day you go live. Even if you don't want to have a look at it for like 6 months, 12 months, that's totally fine. I don't judge. If you want to get a handle on how to read your traffic reports, oops, let's skip ahead so we actually see what's the good stuff. If you want to have a handle on how to do these things or know what your agency is getting prepared for you, if you're using an agency, or what you're getting out of your CRM tool, go and see Kate Toon. She has great educational tools around DIY SEO. Basically, this is the stage of all the reports and all the marketing nerds, and they are wonderful people. Budget and hiring. I've got an ebook on this. Go have a look. It's free. It covers a lot of this stuff. There are slides for this with all of these key points. I will not go through these. These are a lot. These slides are going to be up on the WordCamp website. I'll probably put them on my own website too, which is here. 2 of my websites. You can get them there and look at your leisure. Thank you very much. All right, questions?
Do we have any questions for Jasmine?
Covered pretty much everything on website development, so like, these questions could be on anything right now.
That was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Do you template a lot of the stuff? Because I suppose this would lead to templating at least the fundamentals, and then you can actually grow on that for specific clients.
Deliverables, do you mean the outputs? Yeah. In an ideal world, I would be able to tell you I have a fabulous library of templates of all of those deliverables. I don't. I have templates-ish. I have a starting point that I will use. And often it's like I will take the one from the last project and I will start again, because every time, it's the best thing about projects, if you have not learnt how to do something better from one project, then it's been a fail to me. So you improve every time. Can you,
as a documentation specialist, can you recommend any kind of software or a particular software that would be great for documenting?
Oh, so many. Process Street is great. That's a great place to start, yeah. Asana is kind of cool as well if you want, like you can make templates for your lists of things that need to be done. You can put links into Loom videos and stuff in there. I'd like that when you need to say, okay, well, help a person over here, do this task for me, here's the steps to do with the instructions, and you can make a copy of it so they actually can tick it off and say, this was done on Monday, this was done on Wednesday, that kind of thing. Whereas the other stuff is more about like a repository of information, like a knowledge base. There's heaps. If email me, I'll send you some stuff if you want this. I could talk about that all day. Yeah, talk about anything all day. I just talk. Hi.
Hi. I'm putting you on the spot here. You can answer ambiguously, but I guess as a designer, I have a clear I want the content first before I create a design or a wireframe. And this topic comes up a lot in design groups I'm in. Wondering, like what comes first, you know? So I'm curious to know either what your view is, if content should come first and the design should come first and then the content, or what the arguments are both ways.
For both sides?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a Pisces and I don't have a strong opinion about anything. I can see the value of everyone's arguments. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, I'm pretty happy either way because this is such a cop-out of an answer. It depends on the project. So sometimes if you're really about optimizing conversions for a site and you're very structure-driven and design-driven, then you would design the layouts first and then say, we have an area here where we need those 300 words of content. From your presentation earlier, we want 300 words to go here, and this is the goal of this content here. And then we have a place down here to serve this goal, we need this much content. It's just, okay, it's the same both ways, it's just that one is done in a more visual way, but both are informed by the strategic goals of that page. Sometimes it's easier to communicate to a client and a copywriter the really targeted need for that copy if we can show it within a wireframe.
But you're just talking wireframe, not full design first.
Yeah, look, a lot of people skip over wireframes and just go straight into design because they can, right? I don't like that. I'd wireframe all day. I would wireframe all day if you paid me to do that. I'd just do that all day. But yeah, it's a matter of preference. I don't think anyone's going to die if you pick the wrong way to do it. Sometimes it will be clearer that a certain approach is better than another. Sometimes it just comes down to how you're going to best communicate and get the best results out of a client or a copywriter. Sorry, it's a really wishy-washy answer. Like as I said, I don't feel strongly about it, but I know some people that are so like, I am not designing a thing until you give me the content, and some people are like, oh, I'm not writing anything until you show me what the page layout looks like. My goodness, what do you think I am, an animal? Like, so that's why I say it's controversial, but I don't care. Content before build, that's it. All right, anyone else got a question they want a non-committal answer to? A lovely Paula at the back.
That was great, Jasmine, thank you.
Thank you.
One thing that is a big challenge in web is actually getting content from clients. You'll have an answer to this one.
No.
So, do you have any tips on just how to do nice little nudges along the way? Like if it's not, hey, how's the content going? Are there things that you can do? Like, do you give a process to a client,
Oh. Okay, I think this is probably a good point to admit that I suck at project management, and that is why I am so obsessed about sharing this information, because I don't always get all these parts right. I would love to be much better at leading clients through projects and being able to magically extract content from them in a fully finished form right on deadline, or before, preferably. It's hard. There's no secret to it. But if you think about it in the context of this is a relationship, it's the same as parenting, it's the same as staff management, client management, very much the same. You set the clear expectations at the start. I think that's all you can do. If you let people know why something needs to be done in a certain way at a certain time, and they know the impact of it not happening, they're a little bit more motivated to do it. If you can make it as brainlessly simple and straightforward as possible, then even better. May not be appropriate, but there's a saying I used to say when I did a lot of process design, was when you make the easy thing to do the right thing to do, then the right thing to do is the easiest thing to do. It's like you design a process where failing means that they've done the right thing, right? Like if someone does the dummy shortcut, then they've still done a really good job at the task. So have a system that works. So using tools like Content Snare, Gather Content, things like that, let the system send the nags to the client to say, hey, this content is due this day. It's 3 days away. It's 2 days away. It's 1 day away. Like, get in their face. Unfortunately, that's what some people respond to. It's probably nothing that you haven't heard before. I'm sorry, I have no magical insights on it, but they're the probably 3 key ways I'd approach it. Yeah. All right. Anyone else would like to ask a question?
I was going to add to the question before.
Oh, please do. Oh, and by the way, if anyone takes objection to my stages and the lists of activities and roles and so on and outputs, or if you think there are things that I've missed that really must be done, please let me know, because this is a work in progress. The first time I've run this, and I would love to add to it and make sure it's a lot more complete. So hit me up. Yes.
So I'm also a fan of letting clients write to space rather than getting them to write first in design. But you are adamant that to not build before you've received that content. Why?
No, it's such a big thing. It's like, where do I start unpacking this? Okay, so your argument's probably, I'm just anticipating what your arguments might be for not needing that. You can use filler text like lorem ipsum and dummy text and things like this. If you have designed if you're writing the content to fit the page layout, that might be okay. If you're doing it the other way around, it's harder, because then the design is going to change throughout the development stage. That really sucks. I like things to be, especially, okay, so a lot of this is in the context of it's a big project and there's a lot of people doing all the different tasks. It's not just like one person going through it. Someone like Emma, who is end-to-end, does the whole thing, might not be such a drama if some of the content isn't supplied before we start building. It might be able to sit to the side, might be able to go with some dummy content, whatever. If you have a developer sitting waiting to start, it might throw out their timelines with other projects, things like this. There's a lot of like cascading problems that come up when things can't get finished on time. My developer does not like me very much if I can't give him a very literal layout of the page with the exact content that's going in there. Just can't work, doesn't want to make decisions on design, doesn't want to make decisions on content. One thing I didn't mention actually, I think it's actually quite unfair when we leave the responsibility for some decision making to people outside of their preferred domain. I don't like giving design or content decisions to developers, because that's usually not what they like to do, and vice versa. You know, it's nice to keep things nice and clean and separate, unless you're a masochist who likes to do all the things. And we exist, but we're a bit crazy, clearly. So yeah, you can prototype, right? Like, so that's basically you're building the site, and you've got dummy content there. So yeah, it's a workflow thing and an efficiency thing, really, is the short answer to your question.
Could I just say that as someone who's had to build a website without the content, in the past it was more of a problem, but you design it for a certain type of content, and then they'd give you the content, and it would be a different content to what you envisaged.
Yes.
And then you'd have to go back and hit the CSS,
Oh.
maybe even the HTML. But with Gutenberg and that, it has taken some of that away.
Yeah, it's a lot more flexible now. I think, again, if you have a clear strategy and you set those constraints around what content they need to return to you for what parts of the page and which pages, it's not as dramatic a problem if they are late with the content. You can build and know that you can just drop this in later. But the scenario you're describing where it doesn't match what you're expecting, and you've done this thing to accommodate it, and now you've got something, a circle to fit in the square, yeah. It is, and it, again, shouldn't be a developer's problem. You shouldn't be dumping that kind of chaos on them. So, courtesy.
Okay, thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you very much.
And